I started volunteering.
It's all about who you know in sport.
Am I going to be calling the last 10 seconds of the grand final?
You can connect with the interviewer. The hand goes up when they've got to make a decision.
Having a network is one of the most important things you can do.
I didn't necessarily follow my passion. I followed my curiosity.
Once you've worked in sport, there's no going back.
And then lo and behold, before I left, I got offered two.
Hello and welcome to the SportsGrad Podcast, the ultimate guide to make it in the sports industry. Brought to you by Deakin University, home to the world's #1 sports science school. My name is Reuben Williams. I'm an ex-Cricket Australia employee who started SportsGrad to help others get their dream job in sport, and now it's become my own dream job. The purpose of this podcast is to help you land a job in sport. So if that's you, hit subscribe and I'll be in your ears every week with advice and interviews on how you can start living the dream in sport. Now, today's episode came from a conversation that I had in London recently. So, have been over in London for the SportsGrad meetup. Also went to an Oasis concert, which was unbelievable, by the way. First Manchester show. First time they had their homecoming gig in 16 years. Incredible night. Anyway, here for a couple of different reasons. But when I first landed in London, there's a guy called Charlie who follows SportsGrad, and he saw that I was in the area in Hammersmith that day, and he said, "Hey Reuben, I'm nearby, can we catch up?" We caught up for coffee, and we're having a lovely chat, checking in on about what's going on, and towards the end of the conversation, he said, "Reuben, can I please ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure, go for it." And he said, "I wanted to ask you about self-doubt. How do you go about overcoming self-doubt?" And so I want to use today to talk about that topic. I kind of gave Charlie a quick answer, but I wanted to dive into it a bit deeper in case anyone else is going through or facing some self-doubt at the moment and needs some help and some guidance on how I've dealt with it in the past, for at least for myself. So that's what we're going to go into today. And so I wanted to give you some guidance that can either help you get started if you feel like you are hitting some mental barriers that are preventing you from even getting off the starting blocks, or help you keep going if you feel like you are burning out and you're like, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. Hopefully give you some context and some advice and some tools that can help you continue on to get to where you need to go. Because at the end of the day, like, what we're talking about is really like your mental strength to overcome a barrier that exists in the form of fear and doubt, and your ability to literally like hoist yourself up over that fence of fear and doubt is a muscle, and it gets stronger every single time. And I know when I was starting out, my mental capacity to deal with hard things was very small. Now it's very high. Before I go into a couple of different things that have helped me, I want to give you a bit of context as to what I've been through and some of the areas where fear and doubt has crept up, and that over time I've got much better at it. So for example, the first place that fear and doubt started to creep up in my life was in my career. So trying to break into the sports industry. Now, when I first thought about a career in sport, I initially ran away from it and thought, this is way too hard, it's too competitive, it's never going to work. And so I enrolled in a marketing degree. And then after a year and a half, I was like, you know what, I don't enjoy that. I want to do sport. I dropped out and started going after what I really wanted. And so I took like a very costly and 18-month detour because I was just fearful of going after my dream. But eventually, I got there after 5 years. It took 5 years to eventually break into the sports industry from when I started out. So if you think about like how long does it take for fear and doubt to go away until you achieve the thing that you want to do? Well, in my first example, it took 5 years. So I was thinking this is never going to work out. I had my parents kind of thinking, "Reuben, what are you doing with your career?" I didn't want to turn around and look them in the eye and say, "Hey, I've failed again," or "I've dropped out of another degree." And particularly in the sports industry, when I realized how important networking was, the first time it came to networking, I hated it. I was at a place in my life where I was scared to talk to people. I didn't know what to say to people. And when the opportunity came to call up a guy and ask him for his time and grab a coffee with him, his name was Wayne Oswald. I got his phone number, pulled it out, started putting his phone number into my phone, and then froze. And for the next 25 minutes, I was pacing around my backyard trying to bring myself the courage to press call so that I could ask him for a coffee. when I eventually did, he said yes, that coffee turned into a job, and now that's turned into a wonderful mentor relationship that's still going 8 years later. I still know Wayne, still check in with him recently, and I kind of wonder where would I be now if I didn't, get over that hurdle and make that phone call. So for me, in starting out with my career when I was, 21, 22, like that's kind of what fear and doubt looked like in my mind. But eventually just literally had to force my finger onto the phone to say, hey, can we grab a coffee? Quick one. Have you got your eye on a future in sport? If you're ready to transform the industry, then perhaps get ready to study with Deakin and prepare yourself to redefine what it means to work in sport. That's what I did, at least. Deakin's School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences is ranked #1 in the world. Pretty cool, hey? So if you want to turn your passion for sport into an impactful career, get ready to push the limits of exercise science, sport coaching, sport development, sport management, nutrition sciences, physical education, and more. You can do it all at Deakin. Apply now and study at Deakin University. Starting a business. There's a lot of fear and doubt that comes up when you are trying to step into the world of entrepreneurship. And so with SportsGrad, way back in the day, SportsGrad started in 2017. And for 3 years, it was a very average YouTube channel because I just kept thinking to myself, this is never going to work out. This is stupid. It's pointless. No one's watching it. It took me about probably 3 to 6 months or so. I can't even remember. It took me a long time to release the first ever video because I was like, it has to be perfect. It wasn't. It was far from perfect. But I just kept getting in my way to release it the first time. And I remember when I eventually did, I created a YouTube video, put it up online, sent it to my friends to get some feedback. Even that was nerve-wracking in itself. And I had a whole bunch of friends reply and say, I had a whole bunch of friends reply with snoring emojis, and I was like, "Great, thanks for the support, guys." But I had one particular mate called Angus who replied to that message and said, "Great work, Rui, keep it up," and that kind of gave me the confidence to create another video. And then eventually, I got one nice bit of feedback from that next video, and that encouraged me to create the next. And eventually, I had this 3-year sort of turbulent period of being too scared to try, but also too afraid to quit as well. That eventually got me to the point where, relaunched the YouTube channel as a podcast, and then eventually turns into the community, and now we're up to the program. And to be honest, only really in year 8, this is year 8 of SportsGrad, do I feel like it's, going well, at least to the standards that I kind of set for myself. So 5 years to break into sport, 8 years to get a business going. And then even for those who've been following my personal journey as well, if you don't know, I was sexually assaulted during my first job at Cricket Australia. And when that happened, I kind of thought, well, what do I do here? Eventually end up reporting it. Thought, is this going to go anywhere? Took 4 years to get to the magistrate's court, of which, when it did, I was extremely nervous about what was going to happen inside that room. I was nervous about seeing my perpetrator for the first time. I was nervous about, answering the questions of a defense lawyer and so on. And so I had all these fears and doubts that kind of crept up during that period. But eventually, you get to the room, you look your perpetrator in the eye, he looks back at the floor, you answer the first question from the defense lawyer, and you realize actually all these questions are pretty stupid and dumb, and it got me through it. To the point where when they asked me back for the retrial, unfortunately, yes, he got found guilty, but then it led to a retrial. When I got back in that room, it was a piece of piss. I was like, I've done this before. I've answered these questions before. I'm not scared of anything here. Let's just go and get it done. It was more of an inconvenience than anything. I had to give a pitch to our lovely sponsors, Deakin University, on the same day. And I said to the judge in the room, I was like, I need to be out of here at 3:30 so I can go give my pitch to Malcolm Speed, David Shilbury, and the rest of the guys at the Deakin Sport Network. And I was like, thanks, I'll see you tomorrow. And then I walk across town and go and deliver that pitch, to which they said, you did a fantastic job. So that's kind of some of the areas where fear and doubt have crept up. And yes, some of them are pretty extreme, and I hope no one ever has to go through them. But over time, it's helped me get to this point where I feel very confident in my ability and who I am and what I want to do. It's taken a long time, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of different trial and error to get there, but you do eventually get there. So a couple of different things that have kind of helped me overcome fear and doubt along the way. First thing I want to talk about are a couple of just mental reminders to myself that whenever I hit this crossroad of, do I step into the arena or do I stay out of it? This is what comes to mind. The first one is, one day we're all going to be dead, so who cares? So for example, I still have some doubts about some of the posts that I put out on LinkedIn. I'm like, is this going to hit home? Is it a bit risky? Whatever. And then I just get to the point where I'm like, you know what, Reuben, one day we're all going to be dead, so just post it. Who cares? And then it's never as bad as I seem, and we move on from there. So that's one thing I just try to remind myself, as dark as it is that one day we're all going to be gone and forgotten, so who cares? The next thing, which kind of is along a similar sort of train of thought, is that one day you are going to reach a certain age, so you might as well be that certain age and doing the thing that you want. And this comes from a place of never thinking that time will pass. Because when I was 10 years old, I remember thinking, 15 is such an old age. That's never going to happen to me. And then I'd turn 15 and I'd be like, 21 is such an old age. I'm never going to be 21. And then 21 would hit and I'd be like, 30 is such an old age. And that's never going to come. And then I'd turn 30 and I was like, actually 40 is going to come. So you might as well prepare for it. So one thing I used to tell myself is 25 is going to come. 30 is going to come. 40 is going to come. You might as well be 40 and doing what you love. So just keep going on the same path. And that allowed me to just kind of prepare myself that, you know what, you don't need to have achieved all your dreams and goals right now, but, perhaps, in 40 years time, in 40 years time, in 10 years time, that's when, things can be amazing. I think particularly for me and my goals, because they used to be career goals when I was at Cricket Australia working directly in the industry, and I was like, I want to get to this certain height and I want to be doing all these different things and this title and this salary, the rest of it. Now that the game that I'm playing is, entrepreneurship, when I was starting out, I thought, I want to be 30 under 30. I want to be doing all these different things. I want to be on the, win these awards, whatever. When I actually step back and start to look at the range of people who are successful in business, most of them don't get there until they're 40 or 50. And so in recent years, I've kind of said to myself, I was like, well, Reuben, who cares? You don't have to be a millionaire at 30. But what if you were super successful at 40? I'm like, well, that's I'm 31 now. I'm like, that's still 8.5 years away. So I've got a long time to figure that out. And that's kind of just helped me relax. So, but it's also helped me think that, that day will come. You might as well prepare for it. Stay on the same path you're on, but just keep ticking it off little by little each day. Third one is treat everything as a test. So when I was treating everything that I was putting out into the world by, publishing content, publishing podcasts, etc., as though it needed to be a perfect, finalized, finished product, that's when I would spend too much time on it. That's when I would stress about it, and that's when I would eventually never release it. Whereas now I try to see things more of a test, and they're probably less polished, but I'm putting them out into the world so I can get feedback on what worked quicker, so that, let's say, for example, if I'm trying to create videos and I put 10 out and I spend, let's say I want to spend, a month trying to make sure the first one is perfect. I could, in that same month, I could put out 10 videos and figure out what works and what doesn't work and get to a point where I'm like, okay, now I know what will work quicker than had I just spent so much time ruminating on it to put out the first one. So what I'm trying to do now is treat everything as a test, because either it hits home or I learn something from it. And the same sort of thing I applied to the thoughts that I share around going through the assault, and I've spoken about what it's like to be a male victim of sexual assault and hearing the experiences of female victims of sexual assault as well. And often when I was having that conversation online, I would think to myself, well, am I really qualified to talk about this sort of stuff? And is anyone going to listen to me? And in those moments, I would tell myself, well, Reuben, put your thoughts out there. And if you get crucified for it, then at least you're going to learn and you will get smarter for it. Your thinking will improve based on the feedback that you get from online people. Not everyone. Some people are trolls and just idiots. But smart people will show up and give you feedback if you are wrong here. But if you are not wrong, then it might actually help someone. So that's kind of how I treat everything. And there are a lot of things that I want to talk about that, I'm kind of nervous to put out into the world. But my attitude to that is, we'll just treat it as a test, because you either get smarter or you'll help someone. So that's kind of what goes on in my mind. So just reminding myself, one day you're going to be dead. Who cares? The next 5 years, 10 years is going to come. You might as well just stay on the same path that you're on. And just treat everything as a test, because you either help someone or you do well for yourself, or you will quickly learn faster than you can, take the time to perfect everything. So the last thing I want to give you to help you with this is a very actionable activity. And this is something that I've been using since 2020 for over 5 years now. And it's an activity called fear setting, which is coined by the best-selling author and top-rated podcaster Tim Ferriss. And I came across this at a time when I was stood down from Cricket Australia. I wasn't sure if I should, pick up some just cash labouring job just to kind of make money to pass the time, or if I should dive into everything and throw myself at starting SportsGrad. And I went through this exercise, and I quickly decided, you know what, I can't afford not to give SportsGrad a go, because the worst that could happen is actually I live with this regret of I wish I had done this thing. And after going through the exercise, within 9 days, I had flipped my life to move from Melbourne down to Lorne and started building. And you know what, 5 years later after that relaunch, we're still here today. So these are the steps. So if you are currently facing fear and doubt, the first thing you want to do is define what that fear is. So for example, with me in the networking situation was I am fearful of saying like the wrong thing and I'm going to ruin my relationship with Wayne. Put that down. Or for me and SportsGrad, my fear was I fear that my business will be a flop and I'll end up wasting $5,000 trying to start a business. Step 2 is prevent. So it's like, cool, now you know what you're scared of. What could you do to prevent your fear from coming true? So in the networking situation, preventing that fear from coming true might be like, well, I could prepare for the meeting that I'm going to have. I could write down the specific questions that I want to ask. I could even plan to a T, what I'm going to say when I greet Wayne for the first time and how I'm going to say goodbye to him, because maybe I'm so fearful of every single word that comes out of my mouth. I just need to write it down on paper first. So that would give me confidence that I know what to say if I was worried about saying the wrong thing. For SportsGrad, preventing it was draw up a business plan and get someone to review it so they can see where your mistakes might be before you actually go and make them. Step number 3 is repair. So thinking about if your fear came true, what would you do to repair the situation? And so, for example, let's say I go into this networking situation with Wayne and I say the wrong thing and he never wants to talk to me again. What could I do to repair it? Well, I could call him up a week later and just say to him, hey, Wayne, just wanted to apologize for wasting your time, or just want to apologize for the bad impression that I made. To be honest, I was really nervous meeting you and I've never done this before. And I really appreciate you giving me your time, but this was a difficult thing for me to do and I feel like I came off the wrong way. And so I just wanted to apologize for that. I've never actually thought about that example before, but I reckon should somebody do that, that would be so well received, because for someone like Wayne, I'm just thinking about if Wayne received a text message from a 21-year-old guy saying, hey, basically admitting to the fear, the social anxiety that comes with networking and the ability to talk about that vulnerably and what impression that would leave on Wayne. I know if someone did that to me, I'd be like, mate, that's awesome that you can admit that this is something you're scared of. Let me spend more time with you. So feel free to use that if you want. But, that's what I'd be doing to think about how can I repair this situation if you were going to, make a fool of yourself in a networking situation. For me in SportsGrad, I thought, well, if my fear comes true, I waste 5 to 10 grand trying to start a business. How would I repair it? Well, I just go get another job. It's like, okay, cool. Well, if the worst situation is I just have to get another job, that's not too bad. So the other thing you want to do with this is kind of give your fear a numbered rating from 1 to 10. So 1 being not that bad, 10 being your life is over. So based on the irreversible impact of your fear coming true. So for example, the irreversible impact of, saying the wrong thing in networking, probably honestly 1 or 2 out of 10. For me in SportsGrad, I reckon at the time, I think I put a 4 out of 10. Like, if I waste 5 to 10 grand in this business, it's going to be a 4 out of 10 life-ending impact. Now I look back at it and I'm like, mate, there is so much money in the world. You are smart enough to find another way to get some. If you waste 5 to 10 grand chasing a dream, like, it's not going to be the end of the world. So I think I put a 4 out of 10 down at the time. In hindsight, probably a 1 out of 10, but it felt pretty big to me at the time. But then what you want to do is measure the potential upside. So, and you want to think about it in the context of giving yourself a bit of a buffer. So even if you gave this like a 50% effort, so you didn't have to be at your best, what potential upside could there be? So I thought about, in the context of networking, like, even if I had an average conversation, well, at least I could, it could lead to like, a 7 out of 10 positive upside because maybe mate Wayne remembers me and maybe he can introduce me to someone in his network. So that's pretty good. And then for SportsGrad, I was like, well, even if I gave it a 50% effort, it might help me get another job because now I have a bit of a profile and people can come through my podcast and it will just help with the next stage of my career. And I thought, well, maybe that'll be an 8 out of 10. Ended up being an 11 out of 10. So, and same for Wayne as well. Like, that's been one of the best relationships in my life in the last decade. So, but then when I was able to kind of look at my fear, which is like, somewhere between a 2 and a 4 out of 10, and the potential upside being somewhere, around an 8 out of 10, I was like, as a logical person, looking at what I'm facing on paper and what is, the cost of the fear or the potential downside of the fear versus the potential upside of the fear, I was like, I'm risking a 4 out of 10 for a potential 8 out of 10. Like, that's a bet I'm willing to take. And so, but then when that got even stronger for me was when I started to really map out the cost of inaction. And what you want to do, what you want to think about with cost of inaction is the cost of inaction financially, the cost of inaction emotionally, and the cost of inaction physically. So for example, like, if we take the cost of inaction of networking, well, it might cost you a job. Like you might be one connection away from a full-time salary that's paying you $80,000 a year. Emotionally, you might be one connection away from a job that helps you actually do what you enjoy, and so your mental health comes back to life and you start feeling yourself again. And then physically, it might allow you to step into a workplace and an environment where you are around like-minded people who you enjoy talking to. You're in a place that's positive, it's uplifting, and you can surround yourself in the environment that you want to go to every single day. For me, with SportsGrad, like the cost of inaction was, financially, I was like, well, what if this blows up one day? What could that potentially look like? Emotionally, I thought, that was probably the biggest one. The emotional cost of inaction was the biggest one for me because I didn't want to live with myself thinking, oh, if only you had given that SportsGrad idea a proper shot, where might you be now? And so that was the strongest propeller for me to actually go ahead and start SportsGrad. And then on the physical front, I was like, well, what if it allowed me to be flexible with where I lived? Could I move down to Lawn? Could I live around the world? Could I travel to different parts of the world and have the flexibility to go to different events when I want to because I'm working for myself? And so what you want to do is think about the cost of inaction across those 3 different areas, but then also extrapolate it out over, 3 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years. Keep casting your mind further and further into the future because, initially I was like, well, in the first 3 to 6 months, not doing SportsGrad probably won't cost me that much and I'll live with the regret for a little bit longer. But far out, if I have to still have this thought in my head in 5 years' time, like, fuck that. I do not want to be living my life this way. And so that's when I was like, okay, we need to make this happen. Go and do it. And we did. So that is a bit about how I overcome fear and self-doubt. It is not a straightforward journey. It is not a short journey. As I mentioned, like the 3 different areas that I've kind of applied this in my life have taken a long time to come to fruition. Breaking into sport took me 5 years. Getting to the end of a sexual assault trial through the legal system took 6 years. Getting SportsGrad to a point where I was happy with it took 8 years. So if you're just starting out, just remember that this will take time, but it does get much easier over time. And so you never really get good at, so you never really get to the point where fear and doubt completely go away, but you get to the point where you can do it still in spite of the fear living there anyway. And so if you, with this sort of stuff, like as I said at the top of the episode, being able to flex that muscle that allows you to get over the fear and doubt is a muscle, and you have to develop that muscle with time. And so, if you were walking to the gym for the very first time trying to get ripped, you wouldn't expect yourself to go straight to, the bench press and start doing reps of 100 kilos the first time you walk in. You might just start with 5 kilo dumbbells and work your way up. So find a way to kind of flex that muscle of courage on the 5 kilo dumbbells until eventually you move up to the 10, and then you move up to the 20. And then in my situation, you go from a point where you were too scared to pick up the phone and call someone to ask them for coffee, to the point where you have no worries at all talking openly about your experience with sexual assault on TikTok for millions of people. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of where I've got to. So I hope this helps. I'll leave you with one final thing, and that is a quote from Mark Twain. And he says, "I have known many troubles in my life, but most of them never came true." Hey, last thing before you go. Everyone knows the sports industry is super competitive, so you might want to keep this to yourself. But every Monday, I send out an email called Shortcuts by SportsGrad. It takes 5 minutes to read, and it gives you everything you need to get an edge over other job hunters on a silver platter. Here you'll find exclusive job opportunities, networking events, and premium resources to get ahead. Again, it takes less than 5 minutes to read, and it's designed to help you get ahead and stay ahead. So if you want to receive the next one in your inbox, head to sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter. But as I mentioned, competition for jobs in sport is red hot,